Yes, I'm far.
Cool.
I'm the far one.
You got it. Awesome. Hey, thanks, guys. I'm kind of curious. By the way, Will, if you do want to ask something, you can kind of throw your hand up, and I'll try to look out every couple of minutes. Now, everyone, raise your cell phone and take a picture. Right? Perfect.
No.
So there's this kind of common thread of like independence, right? Obviously, you talk about it as side projects, but this is like your main thing right now. This is your jack of all trades, and you're kind of building something for independence, right? I'm kind of curious as to like how we got here. Like, is the full-time job that we kind of like used to think was the ideal, is that dead? Is that over? Tobias, why don't you start? Dead? You're the arbiter.
If full-time jobs are dead?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
All of this is like, it seems to be like we're professing this wonderful kind of like, okay, freelance lifestyle, we can have it all.
I don't think so. It's not going to be dead. No.
So you come at it from a place that kind of looks at it as, there is a full-time job, but there's this stuff that you want to do on the side.
Yeah.
Whereas Ann, I kind of look at your story and look at it as like, well, I mean, maybe we're here because magazines are firing people. So now we're out of necessity. You talk about the necessity-driven entrepreneur. But is the concept of like wanting to be in one place and keeping that stuff on the side dead? Or is it really now we're in this economy of having to do all of these things and figure this out?
I mean, I think part of it depends on your personality and like where you are in your career and what's happening in your industry and all these other questions. I mean, there are some magazines where I've worked before that wouldn't let me do some of these things. Or like I've actually been asked to sign a thing that says everything I make creatively, even if I don't make it while on the clock, belongs to you in a full-time job. So there are some situations where like maybe it's in direct opposition. I also think that I learned skills that I use now to work for myself that I needed a full-time job to teach me, that I'm not sure I would have just picked up on my own. So, and I might have a full-time job again at some point in the future.
Right. You actually talk about it kind of foundationally. You're like, you need this. I mean, it comes from a place of privilege somewhat. You're like, this is key to this. And you obviously had a number of full-time things that were...
Actually not, no.
Oh, no, okay. Were all those side hustles that we saw, the agency and the Spotify stuff? And that
well, that was my own agency.
Okay, even at Spotify.
No, Spotify was the only full-time job I ever really had.
Okay.
So that's why I don't know if that's like a foundation.
No, but this is, I look at it as from obviously like a few different angles there, but maybe we can kind of like talk about it from the crew perspective. You're capitalizing on growth. It seems like freelance work seems to be very prevalent and growing right now. You actually reference, Ann, as well, this idea of, this is in 2020, 40% of the people in North America or in the States are going to be freelance people. Like, from your perspective, Mikael, are you building something for the future because that full-time job is going to be less and less important?
I mean, it's already 40% right now, actually.
No kidding.
It's going to be...
It's going to be 50. Yeah.
It's going to be 50.
Well, it depends on,
it depends on
how
the
you
stat.
slice it.
Okay.
Right.
In Canada, it's already 40%, let's say.
Okay.
But I think what full-time positions were is they've always represented stability. That's the challenge with freelance, and it's very hard. That's what the definition of freelance. It's like you can do a whole bunch of different things, but then you run into this consistency issue. So I think where we're headed, and actually what we're trying to help build, is can you establish consistency for people on an independent basis? Previously, it hasn't really been possible because infrastructure. You had all this physical stuff, and how are you going to move it around effectively in a cost-effective way to make it happen? But if you have software that can do this, but it's still really hard. It's like anything. It's like artificial intelligence.
Right.
Is everything going to be robots soon? I don't know about soon, but maybe at a point, a lot of stuff. But there's still going to be people who have built that, and maybe the fractions are going to decrease and decrease and decrease. But like with artificial intelligence, that has to outpace human evolution. Our thinking and our ability to outpace each other, and it's the same thing with this industry.
So I look at it, and you wrote this thing about when you talked about personal brand in one of the articles, you mentioned that your job security is kind of improved with the kind of, as you add things to your plate, as you kind of do more of these things. So this idea of consistency is kind of getting flipped on its head, right? And I guess, Tobias, you probably feel that, but maybe, Ann, job security increasing now?
Well, I come from a contracting industry, like not an expanding
Right.
industry. I
Right.
mean, it also kind of depends on how broadly you define media. But like, if you kind of narrowly look at the jobs that I had before I was self-employed, those jobs are less stable than they were 10, 20 years ago.
Right.
And so for me, I feel a lot more secure in that if I want to be doing some variation on what I'm doing now in 5 years, I'll probably be able to. Whereas, I have drinks with my friends who are staffers at magazines, and like, I mean, there could be a reshuffling, or like their parent company could decide to shutter whatever thing they're working at, and it's gone. Which is
Right.
not to say their skill set is gone or the whole industry is gone, but I do think that your perspective on stability is very much informed by like the type of work that you do.
Right. But it seems to me like at the root of all this, there is this, you're adding stability by somehow diversifying more. You actually talked about that, Tobias. You said, like the more things I do, the more I become a jack of all trades, the more kind of security I have in that. Is that likely to change at all? Is this something that, you would advise people to take on?
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean, that's like just my strategy. I feel like the
Right.
more I diversify like my revenue streams, basically, the more I feel secure, because I don't want to be dependent on just this like one project or this like one client. For example, freelance, and I haven't done freelance since I left Spotify, because I just don't like freelance work, because I don't like being dependent on someone else like paying me once in a while.
Right.
I chose like a little bit of a path that might be not like very well explored right now, so that's why I'm just figuring it out. I'm building like all of these different products. I'm writing like my email list, for example. I'm doing like the podcast. I call it a show because I don't like podcasts. People don't pay for podcasts. That's the thing.
Nice. Show. Good
Right?
tip. It's a show, not a
Anyways,
podcast.
at least that's what I'm telling myself. And I'm doing all of these like different projects, like the portfolio tool, and I just feel like that, accumulates.
So let's take it back for 1 second. In other words, like if we go back in time, because we all saw kind of these graphs, right, that were like, things were kind of like iffy for a while, and like it became wildly successful. So looking back on it, I feel like it's instead of, we can spin it as a place of privilege that right now you have a lot of freedom to do what you want to do. You have a lot of, because you make that freedom, but you also, they're not freelance projects, they're your own. But for people who are trying to explore, even within the bounds of either their current job or going out on their own or taking a chance maybe like you did, I'm kind of curious, if we scale it back and before you got wildly successful, what's the piece of advice to be able to translate to people at that time? There isn't that security that's attached to that. They don't have the flexibility that's there. What would you say is, okay, how do you start on that path, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, 2012 is when I started. It's 2016 now. My actual original inspiration for design was Tobias. I saw one of his projects, and he wrote this big concept. It was called .mail, and this was before building a mail client was cool. It's like mailbox and everything. But I remember seeing that, and I remember this was sort of the inspiration, and just seeing a lot of other work that he would create. And I'm like, I'm nothing. I have 140 people following me on Twitter. I follow 140 something.
Right.
I have like 4 tweets. And no one's going to care about anything that I'm making.
That's a good follower to tweet ratio, by the way.
But I knew that in order for people to care, you have to make. So you're like stuck in this little kind of chicken and egg thing. But if you follow some of these principles of this build stupid, because you're already stupid. Like I was stupid.
Right.
I could kind of handle Photoshop, and I was like, I'm going to build something really stupid. People are going to think this is dumb. When we put it up on Hacker News, the #1 comment, it was #1 that day, and it was 400 upvotes, was like, a stupid Tumblr blog is #1.
Right.
That was the #1 comment. And I mean, that's what it was, but it was so stupid that
Don't listen to
people used it.
anybody.
And then, like, if you see where it can take you, sometimes you don't expect it, but you're starting really, really stupid. You're
So,
using your stupidity as an advantage.
And I'm kind of curious what you think about that, because that whole staff got fired, and it looked like you started at a place of necessity, be like, okay, well, I'm going to start exploring these other things. Is that the impetus there, or can it really be as simple as that?
I mean, part of the motivation for us was just that people in our industry were talking about us because we had just been fired, and we were like, we want them to talk about a thing we made, not about this thing that happened, so I guess we have to make something.
Cool.
And I do think it's funny, when you were just saying, listening to you talk, I was thinking about people, I get emails sometimes from people who are like, I've always wanted to be a writer, something like that. And I'm like, well, what do you write right now? And they're always like, it's crickets. And so there is something about, like, if you want to be a maker, you just make something, and it's like, maybe it would be the worst thing you ever made in your life, or, or maybe, I don't know. Yeah. There is something about just doing a thing, rather than stating an intention to do a thing.
Right, this is the sitting on the couch, everyone's sitting on the couch, but
exactly.
you want to stay busy. And the crazy thing, actually, when I listen to all of you talk, I'm like, that is a shitload of work. Like, the side hustle is not like, okay, I'll casually do this on the side. You each have kind of like 10 things going on. Is that the way this thing has to get built? Is that the way this has to get built? You got to be doing a lot of stuff at once?
No, not necessarily. I mean, this is just how I work, because I'm a lazy person. And
you say that, but that's
no,
bullshit.
I'm very lazy and I procrastinate a lot. Like, if you don't give me 10 projects to work on, I'm just gonna watch TV all day. It's just like I'm just tricking myself. So I don't think everyone has to do that. Like, some people are very good with working on just one project. I just can't do it. If I work on one project, I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I cheat on work with other work. That's
how
why I
I
keep
do it
making
too.
more work.
Yeah.
Okay, so that seems to be a secret here. It's like you need to have enough work in the pipeline to be like, well, I want to ignore one thing but do another.
Because you procrastinate on, like, another project. I procrastinate by doing my taxes.
Right.
Like, because I'm like, stuck creatively on a project. I'm like, all right, then I'm just going to do my taxes.
I mean, you stare at your to-do list, right? And the thing that you don't want to do the most is the most important thing. But if you have a whole bunch of stuff, you can pick something off the bottom, which is actually, if you were doing it by itself, would be really important.
Yeah.
But because it's part of this whole list, you're like, oh, it's not that important. But then it snowballs, and you start doing all those little things.
I love that because it flies in the face of, I feel like, every productivity tip that I read. It's like, put the most important thing first, or the hardest thing first, and now we're like, you know what, just put enough things on there, and you'll get to one of those things. Fucking, that's awesome. Just put enough things on your to-do list. Anyone have any questions or no?
I actually have a question for these guys. Do you have to-do lists? Sorry, I'm just curious. Do you have lists?
I'm changing every month how I do things. It's like feeds going in. I tried to automate it at one point where I would like write down my priorities and try to like program it with the help of a person. So I was like, could you just take these things, and if I don't do them, then the next day it shifts automatically and everything keeps shifting. But I just sucked, and then I would suck for a month, and then I would go back and look at my tool, and I'd be like, holy shit, I did everything anyway. Like, why am I trying to track all this? And I think it's nice getting off your brain. I'll get it all off my brain. But if you kind of stop tracking, it's the actions thing again. Like, the stuff that's important to you just does naturally get done.
So Tobias, do you have a to-do list?
I have every single to-do app.
Okay, cool. Phil. Yes.
I swear, I tried them all.
Yes.
I tried every single to-do list app. I don't have a to-do list. No, I don't know. I always try it, but it doesn't work. It's just like I write to-do lists.
Have you found success with that, Ann?
I have. I mean, it would not look like a to-do list to people here, but it's like the paragraphs I paste in and just an email address or whatever. I mean, it is like, there is a document that has a bunch of stuff in it that fills that role. But it's not like check boxes of like, call so-and-so.
Yeah, I have that too.
Yeah.
Or you just wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh shit.
Yes, yes, exactly.
I gotta do that tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is your methodology?
There's no methodology.
Fuck.
That's why I was curious. I was like, do you have the answer? Anyway.
Yeah. No, I'm personally curious about that too. Especially you, Mikael. I feel like I read your blog. I read your blog and your post, and I'm like, oh, cool. I'm gonna learn from this and like get better at like doing shit or whatever. And then we come here and I'm like, wow. Whatever. Cool. That's what's fun about having you guys. So you all talked about this thing about, you all play on this idea of, doing what you like or pursuing your passion, or Tobias, you wrote this post about it's not your passion, it's just simplified as like do what excites you. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, like, how important is that fundamentally to, especially if you're going to fill up your to-do list, how important is that thing kind of exciting you ahead of that thing actually making you money, right? Who wants to jump on that one?
I could start. Will it work is like the most incentivizing thing at the beginning for me. So I'm always thinking like, you have this weird idea that's going to connect a few things in a new way that doesn't exist. I can't actually code, so I'm actually thinking of different services that could combine together and create a thing. That's what Unsplash was.
Right.
So you're like, okay, this could work, and if it solves this problem in a weird way without any code, but I have no idea if this is going to work. And it's really exciting to be able to do something in like 3 hours that can kind of tell you if it's going to work or not, if it feels good for me. And then I do a bit of validation from other people. Like that kind of gives some fuel to it as well. Like if Unsplash was made and nobody cared about it, I don't know if I would have sent that email every week.
Right.
But like now you have people to answer to. You know, people subscribed on your newsletter. I remember it was like the Google Doc, and people started coming in like that, and I was like, shit, I don't even know where to get the next 10 photos. So I wrote to the photographer, and he's like, we can't do it anymore. And I was so scared. I had no idea what to do. And then we had exactly 10 photos for the second week.
So that's the other thing I was wondering. I'm going to jump over to that, which is there's not just this concept of like, okay, doing what you like, but it's also like getting, I know you want to ignore people, Tobias, but this idea of like, if you create this expectation, that ensures some of the stuff you're talking about in terms of like consistency and continued progress and that kind of thing. Like how important is it to actually put that out there into the world? Maybe, Anne, you can talk about that because you put so many of these things actually out there into the world.
Yeah, sometimes I just feel like it's because I've been doing it consistently that people pay attention. Like I don't have, there's nothing that I'm like week 1, it was a huge success. It's mostly I'm interested enough to keep doing it. And there's also some sort of like editor disciplinarian. I work on like weekly, monthly calendars. There's something baked in from when I had a full-time job that made me do that, that makes me want to do that with my side projects. But I don't know. I mean, the answer is I don't know. Like the motivation. And like on the question of like paid work versus the side project type stuff, the paid work that I do is writing, and I'm only useful as a writer like in the morning until maybe like lunchtime.
Right.
Like, and if I'm writing after lunch, it's because like I have really fucked up my schedule or like anyway. And so all of this other stuff is what happens in the afternoon. I don't know. There is some sort of logic to like where does the paid and unpaid go, but it's every day, not like in a cosmic or big level.
Yeah, and what about you, Tobias? Like putting it out into the world, is that kind of like a success factor there?
Oh yeah, for me that's very important because again, like I only function under pressure, so like the more people know about it and they can hold me accountable to it, that's how I work basically. Because if I have an idea and I want to do something and I don't tell anyone about it and I keep it a secret, no one knows about it. Like I can do it like in 10 years, like it doesn't matter, you know, because I'm not going to hold myself accountable.
Does as your kind of quote unquote fame has increased, have the stakes gotten higher and your success been more, or your follow through kind of been improved there, or no? Because it seems like you now have more to lose. You put something out into the world, people know it, or there's more people that are going to see it, whereas maybe 10 years ago, there would have been fewer. The audience has grown.
Oh, you mean like it's more pressure?
That's why his new mantra is side projects should be stupid. It's perfect.
Yeah, but the thing is like I always get motivated by like conflict a lot in a way. Like this sounds stupid, but this is why teachers hated me in school, because like teachers were always telling me I'm like too stupid to study, like you can't do that, you know, you're never gonna find a job. And I really like that in a way. Like I was always like, I'm gonna show you, you know, asshole.
Right.
And that kind of like, this is for me, for example, I'm always like, every time I work on a project, there's something interesting there when I share something with my friends or my immediate friend circle, and 10 people are like, Tobias, that's stupid. I'm like,
nailed it.
There's something there. I think I have to work on this. Because if everyone is like, yeah, you know, or everyone's like, oh yeah, that's great. I'm like, nah, I'm gonna try something new. Because it's like, you have to, I don't know why this works so well, but if there's 10 people calling you stupid, you have your validation there, like prove them wrong. And for me, that's the main motivation, because this is like, it's so sweet. You know, like it tastes so sweet. Yeah. Like once you proved everyone wrong, right? Like same as like with Unsplash, maybe, you know, where there were a lot of people maybe like who were
this is dumb.
Yeah, saying that this is dumb and everything. You know, it's so sweet. It's like a sweet taste when you finally have it and you can prove them all wrong. And that's what I think I get motivated by a lot. Like that helps me at least a lot. I don't know.
Cool.
That sounds kind of.
Oh no,
weird,
I think that's something we can all relate to, right? It's like I think that happens all the time. It's like we have an idea and external validation. If you're waiting for that.
But if people are really pissed off by your idea, there's usually something there. Right? Cool. I mean, it's like, I don't know, I feel that about writing too. Like when I read something from a writer and I'm like, didn't touch me, you know, wasn't really provoking anything. Like that, I don't think it's good writing. But if you write something and I'm like super mad at you, I find that very efficient writing because you really touched me. I mean, I might be like hating you or anything, but like there's like there's like emotions in me, and I'm like, I hate this author so much, but this is I'm gonna buy the book, and
Just to hate read more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but you know what I mean, like it's
There's something very German there about that being.
Well, no, but it's also it is also true that like essentially if you are not in whatever it is, I think writing is a great example. But if people do not have, if some people don't hate it, then you're doing it wrong. Because if everybody loves it, then it's just nothing. Like it's what is a thing that everybody loves? I don't know. I mean, food or something like some category so broad that it's just like meaningless. What are you even doing?
Good call. That's actually, I feel like it's kind of this kind of reoccurring theme from all of you. It's like a lot of these ideas have been shot down. The color green inspired a lot of outrage. I feel like this is a thing that we can kind of reuse here in terms of like our own experiences. Like it doesn't, you don't need everyone to think that's a great idea. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead. I'll repeat the question.
How many times do you fail before you succeed?
Ooh. So this kind of, she asked, how many times do you fail before you succeed? I felt the same thing. I keep watching the graphs, right, of this failure and then be like, oh, sudden wild success. How many, for each of those successes that we see, how many failures do we have? Maybe we can start with you, Mikael.
Yeah, and I mean, if we call that success, let's say that's success. I mean, let's say success is something that people and you care about. I think until Crew and Unsplash, like nothing was hitting. I would make a lot of stuff. I played soccer until I was 18. That was like my original thing. I want to be a professional soccer player. Played at Olympic development, and then I messed up my knee, and I was like, oh no, this is it. But I put everything into that, and that was like huge. Like, but all this time, and it failed technically. And then school, I failed at physics. I got D-, and then failed at a whole bunch of other stuff. Got to Montreal, that worked. But yeah, that's like stuff started working, and eventually you're like honing this intuition, and it's sort of the gut thing. You start to see these patterns of behaviors, and you don't know what it is, and it applies to a lot of different things that you do. And I think what I learned from that whole Montreal thing, that happened 3 years before we did anything with the company. We were like, we can do that. And you remember that, and you start a company, and you're like, I don't. This is nothing. Like doing a company, we found it together, husband and wife. 80% of people didn't want to invest in us because we were husband and wife, and now a lot of people are investing in husband and wife couples. From what I'm hearing from our investors.
You're cool now.
Yeah, so it's like, but you honed that, and it applies to so many different things.
I love that. I love that question too. I feel like I want to do a whole dynamic just on pure failure, like no successes at the end, just failure. Ann, same kind of thing. Do you need a lot of failure to kind of hone that sense?
Well, I feel successful in that, like, I'm happy and I can pay my rent and, like, interested in what I do. But, like, the numbers of the things that I have made that, like, it's not like I'm, like, making a good portion of my income from any of these things. It's not like I've ever made $1 million from any of this stuff. It's sort of like there is, like, a nebulous positive effect to all of it. But, like, it's actually hard for me. I think I consider it a success if it's, like, a couple of people like it or find it useful, and I continue to have fun doing it.
Right.
And I think like one thing, like asking people to pay for those pie charts has made me like doing them less. But now I'm like stuck in where it's like it's a thing that I give people for paying, and so like I'm currently trying to figure out so that's kind of a failure. It's like it's made a thing that I really like doing. Like I used to just like have like a late afternoon stoner session, make like 6 of them, and it was great. but I mean there is something about the accountability factor of like and the regular production of those that has made them, in my opinion, less funny. And so, but now I'm like sunk in on this plan, which I don't think anyone who's subscribed is going to be mad if I switch it up, or like, I don't know, there's a process question to answer, but I don't think that's like a success, or at least it isn't yet.
Okay.
The ads I'm way, way happier with. Like that personal ad that I told you guys about is like, so like that's worth the whole thing. But I mean, there's like a lot of things that like, there are like little failures embedded in some of this stuff too.
Cool, yeah, that's a nice other way of looking at that. Tobias, how many failures for each of those successes? Numbers.
This is such a hard question, but you asked it.
That's right.
I'm gonna look at you. I know that sounds like so weird because some people like to say that, but I don't see these failures as failures. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're just like stepping stones in a way, because you could say, well, there was so much failure in all these schools. Like I applied to 5 different schools and they all told me, you're never going to become a designer. You should better work, I don't know, in something else. That's a failure, but I think it wasn't a failure because just because of it, I opened up my own design studio. Because apparently you can do that without having an education. I was forced to do that. You can open up a business, with no traditional education. So I don't see it as a failure. For me, it's just like there's 2 piles, right? There's one pile of the things that you know that are going to work, and then there's a pile that is equally important with the things you know that are not going to work. And for me, in my life, the pile of things that are not going to work is actually growing a lot. But I'm actually really happy about that because I'm like, okay, that didn't work. Put it on that pile, But then, essentially, because of it, you basically develop what you just mentioned, like that intuition, because you know all the things that are not going to work really, and that makes you more sensible to the things that are going to work, essentially. So I don't really see it as a failure because if I would see it as a failure, I would just be like crying all day. And all these projects that I worked on, like .mail that you mentioned, where I wasted like almost 2 years of my life working on that shitty thing. And that was a waste of time. Like if I would see it like that, I would be super depressed. But again, I learned a lot. I got to know a lot of people, and I try to see the positive things, and there's always positive things. So it's never a failure, really, honestly.
It's only a failure if you make the same mistake twice.
That is actually very good. So it's only a failure if you make the same mistake twice. That's actually also stupid.
Perfect business idea.
Because that's like, you didn't learn anything, right?
Over there, yeah?
I'm a developer, but I'm getting obsessed with the physical environment, physical things. And so you guys travel a lot, you work everywhere. How important is your environment for you? Like, what makes a nice place to work?
Wow, I feel like were you paid by Mikael to come here because he's like, okay. So the question was, okay, so he's a developer, he's very into physical space right now, and he said, what makes a good place to work? So maybe Mikael, we'll start with you, which you didn't really touch on, but you are very deep into figuring that out.
Yeah, I've been playing with this a lot. I mean, you start a company, you have this. It's funny, when I think about this a lot. When you start, a lot of these people start companies that are supposed to do interesting things, right? And especially tech companies are supposed to solve it in a very interesting way. The second they start the company, they run the company like every other company. They run them like 9 to 5, these things that are like, aren't we here to change and question all the things? Mm-hmm. So we really I've thought about this a lot. Most of our team, even though we're in Montreal, a lot of our team is here, I still work from home a lot. I get to walk my dog 3 times a day. And there's a dog walker there. He has never pitched me because I think he's afraid to, but he finally said, just yesterday, and we had been like 3 months, he's seen me come at noon all the time. It's like, I think it's time that you let me do this for you. And he's like, don't you have a job? I'm like, I do, but I have this mix of everything is just time to me. And I think a lot of people, we talk about work-life balance, for instance. And to me, if you're thinking in that way, then you think life is good and work sucks. And that's what that implies.
Yeah.
So if you have to balance those two, they're like, you're thinking of them as 2 separate things, when really it's all just time. And how could you do that? So like at Crew, for instance, we don't work set hours. Anybody can work when they want. It's based on your energy levels and certain things that you can get done. So it's more the right on the question of physical. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're opening a physical space. We will be there. But I think a lot of it is designed, what gets you in sort of this focused mind to do the work without distraction when you have digital distraction at the same time. Mm-hmm. We have some physical distraction, but digital is much more powerful than that. Stuff flies at you, brought to you by your friends. Mm-hmm. It's not like brought to you by ABC anymore.
Right.
So you pay attention and you do all this stuff. And I think that's a challenge. I mean, the physical space, where I pay attention a lot is my physical being while I'm working. I wrote this post about why I killed my standing desk, because there's this whole thing about it. But not to get into it, but I think you can think of those different ways of how can you work physically, and then that sort of just loops in mentally, and it connects.
And it seems like you're touching on it's not just a physical space. There's much more to it in terms of like how you think about time and even energy levels as well.
Right.
And I'm kind of curious. So you guys also, you know, maybe you do actually go to an office. I don't know. How important is that physical space, especially in the context of trying to do all these different things? And what's your take on that?
I would say that most of the writing work I do, the vast majority, I do in my home office. It's increasingly harder for me to write when I am traveling, and often when I'm traveling, it's because I'm like on a reporting trip, not a speaking trip, and so I'm in kind of a listening and gathering stuff mode as opposed to processing and writing outwardly. So that's just a general like rule, I guess, that I write better, and I try to write when I'm at home. All of this other stuff, though, talking about it while I'm out and about and in the world is pretty good for me. I don't have a standing desk. I do record my audio show, no longer saying podcast, in a standing position in my closet. But yeah, I don't know. Space does matter to me, but it's not. I don't know. It's not like a thing I expend a lot of time or energy on.
Tobias?
Over there. I don't see anything here.
Yeah, we can't see anything.
It's just black. It depends really on the work. Like I wish I would be a developer, because I could feel like working everywhere. I just need my laptop, because as a designer, I feel like I need like a proper desk. I need my Wacom tablet. I need a big screen. You know, I need my tools, and that really hinders me to design, because then I procrastinate. You know, every time I'm traveling or I'm not at home or at my desk, I'm like, oh, I can't design. Such a shame. And that's stupid, right? That's like stupid. But I got so used to these tools. So I think design work right now, I still need to be like in my setup. But everything else I can do. Like I have like I sometimes like rent desks somewhere. I work in coffee shops, on planes. I don't know.
Okay, so it seems very adaptable, and it seems like there's more to it than the physical space itself.
Yeah, the physical space for me is only like design stuff. And just to go on what you said earlier with like work-life balance, I see it exactly like that. I feel like the moment you talk about work-life balance, you already talk about one as being evil. And that just doesn't make any sense for me. Like for me, it's like every time it's Friday, I'm like, no, I don't want this week to be over. You know, I don't like the weekend, because everyone's just like gone, and no one is doing something. So I really, you know, I can't really identify with this. That's like, awesome. Yay, it's weekend. I'm like, what does that mean? We all hate our jobs, or you know, it's. And I know I'm speaking from privilege in a way, but you know.
But I think there's something really cool to think about there in terms of like, even when we say work-life balance, which is something we all say, we're already building in context there that maybe we can let go for a little bit, or maybe we can kind of question. Cool. I think we're going to take, one last question, and then we're going to call it, and we're running over. Last one.
Yeah, so you guys are talking about this kind of off the back of that, so you haven't got any kind of work-life balance. How do you cope with like burnout? Do you still get that?
How do you cope with burnout? Do you still get that? Okay.
Should I start?
Let's go back this way. Yeah, Tobias.
I think I actually wrote about this, and it was really hard for me to write about, because I think it was like 2 years ago, and I started having like my first panic attacks in my life, and I really had a super shitty time. And I think like burnout or depression or these kind of things, they just happen when you don't really know, or it's like you're forced to do the things that you don't want to do. You know, I feel like they don't happen if you do things that don't feel like work. At least that's how I think so. And the reason why I got it, or why I felt more and more depressed, was because, and I actually felt like burnout, if that's burnout, I didn't even know, was because I felt, it's almost like when you're like in a room and you feel like you can't leave, and that's when you get burnout, that's when you get depressed. It's like when you feel like you don't really have a choice. And now that I'm working on all the things where I have choice, you know, I can do, every day I can do whatever I want. I feel like it's completely gone. Like I haven't had a panic attack or anything like that in a while, since I completely focus. I just do the things I like doing. So no, I'm not afraid of that as long as I work on the things that I'm very interested
That
in.
you're excited
Like the
about.
moment someone puts me in like a cage or something, that's when I get depressed and burn out.
Anne, how do you avoid that?
Well, I think that it's a thing that's too easy for me to fall into is saying yes to things that come in as opposed to actively trying to use my contacts and resources and ideas to do things that I would rather be doing. So, I mean, sometimes it's not, I don't have a choice. Like, I need to make a little extra money this month. I'm doing an assignment I kind of hate. I feel sad, like whatever. This is, I'm a working human. But I think most of the time when I really look at it, if it's over a sustained period and I'm feeling that feeling, it's because I am basically letting external forces dictate what I'm doing. It's easier to say yes to assignments that come in instead of actively pitching things I would rather be doing. And I'm talking exclusively about the stuff that I do that like pays my rent, that is writing work, as opposed to all the stuff I talked about in the presentation. Because that stuff, generally, if I'm doing writing work that I find fulfilling, that stuff also feels fulfilling. It starts to feel like a burden if the time that I spend on like my core work is stressful and not. So I don't know. Again, also a luxury to say like I want to be proactive about what I'm doing.
Totally.
But if I'm honest, that is something that I've built enough of a career I can do. I just like forget it sometimes.
Right. That's very similar. The idea of being put in a cage rather than finding the stuff that you're kind of excited about. Mikael?
Yeah, I speak to my wife a lot about this actually, and we spoke actually a couple days ago, and she told me this really interesting thing. She said, at the end of your day, you can just say that I did my best. And now it's not I did my best for each separate thing, because what happens is the nicer you are, the more you're going to want to do your best in each thing that you're doing. If you run a podcast, you run a blog, you want to get back to those emails, you read all these articles of people telling you have to respond very quickly, if you need these relationships are very important, partnerships are very important, and you're going to end up doing all those things. So now you're in like 7 different buckets, and if you look at each individual one and try to do your best in each one, you're never going to feel like you're doing your best. So if you remove and you say, what am I trying to be the best at? I'm trying to be my best at just everything together. And I didn't get to this thing, I got to this thing, but I'm doing my best. And at the end of the day, it actually feels really, really good. And I've said it back to her. Recently, she got really stressed out. A bunch of things started coming at her. And I said, Steph, you're doing your best. You just did your best. That's it. And it's a really nice, it's like almost like a child thing, but it changes your brain. And you're just sort of, you're right. I'm doing my best. And I think we don't give ourselves, we're always super hard on ourselves.
Awesome. Cool. My mic is gone. Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot for coming. Thanks to Mikael. Thanks to Ann. Thanks to Tobias. Thanks to you. Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks so much, man. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Tobias. That was awesome.